Good evening, and welcome to the Aurelia for Democracy Forum this evening. I'm Ron Potasiak with Rogers TV, and we're happy to say that this forum is being taped and is currently being shown live. So we're glad to be able to present an open forum to the public here in Simcoe North, and we have with us tonight the following candidates. I'd like to introduce Angelique Belcourt from the New Democratic Party. Chris, and sure, you want a little applause? That's fine.
Thank you.
Stephen Mack, People's Party of Canada. Valerie Powell for the Green Party of Canada. Chris Brown for the Christian Heritage Party. Jerry Hawes for the Liberal Party of Canada. Bruce Stanton, the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, candidate was invited but politely declined. So each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we'll begin with the forum questions. So I'll ask the audience to respect the discussion and not interrupt any of the speakers. There may be time for audience questions after we've completed the formal discussions. So we will begin with Angelique Belcourt from the NDP party. Angelique.
Ani, Tanchi, hello. Bonjour. I'm Angelique. I'm the NDP candidate for Simcoe North. Premièrement, c'est important pour moi que je parle en français pour honorer le fait que je viens de ce territoire, puis je viens d'une communauté française juste hors de Midland, à Perkinsfield. Puis moi, c'est trop important que je représente ma communauté et la communauté française. So, merci pour m'avoir accueilli ici. And I'm really pleased to meet you all. I just introduced you guys to me in French, just because I come from a small French community just outside of Midland. I'm really honored to be here with you all today. I recognize that I'm a young candidate, and I'm representing a really amazing party, so I can't wait to sit down today, tell you guys about the amazing things that my party can do to support you and your community, and I'll leave it at that. My background is in social services and supporting grassroots-led community development, and so I'm really here for you. I'm here for our community, and I want to be your MP to represent you in the House of Commons, and to know that you can have a trusting and accountable relationship with me and have that be on a first-name basis. So I welcome you to hear what I have to say today. I thank you for listening to me, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Angelique. And now we asked Stephen Mack, please, People's Party.
Hello. I am a Canadian. I love Canada, the land where I was born, raised, educated, and employed, because in Canada I have been free. Free to spend my life doing what I want to, free to say what I want to say, free to raise my children how I see fit, and free to run my business the way I want it. I've had an interesting and meaningful life so far. I want this for everybody. That's why I'm here. My name's Stephen Mack. I live and work in Victoria Harbour on the shores of beautiful Georgian Bay, where I spent my childhood summers. I'm here to stay. I'm an electronics engineer with over 30 years' experience in technical, managerial, and executive roles. Today, I run a family business with our name on the door, employing people in our community. I also enjoy the outdoors, and I care a lot about nature. But mostly, I'm into ideas, both old and new, both conventional and perhaps radical. I am your People's Party candidate for Simcoe North. I want to serve you as your Member of Parliament. The best candidate for the MP is not necessarily the person who happens to be with your favorite party. Please keep that in mind. I'm a newcomer to politics. I've never felt that any of the political parties spoke for me or was a place where I belonged. until the People's Party came along. But up to now, I didn't really care because I was free enough. However, lately I do care. Now I am concerned about the direction that our culture and politics are heading, or are perhaps being dragged against our will. When Maxime Bernier started the People's Party of Canada, he got my attention. Here was something I could get behind, a party that was speaking truth to excessive government, high taxes, corporate welfare, weak borders, identity politics, interest groups, and political correctness. Now was the time for me to get personally involved in the public debate, or perhaps more accurately, address the growing lack of debate. The PPC is going to hit the reset button on government sprawl. The government is out of control, relentlessly growing and misdirected. I realize the concept of less government can be unfamiliar or unsettling, but more freedom is good for everybody, regardless of one's political leanings. We attract people who understand that they know how to lead their lives better than any government can. You can make your own decisions on how to spend or save your money, what businesses deserve your patronage or investment, what charities deserve your support, how to minimize your environmental impact, and so on. I hope you're open-minded. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And we asked Valerie Powell, Green Party of Canada.
I'll wait till the little dinging stops. Engaged citizens, fellow candidates, Aurelia for Democracy organizers, good day, bonjour, bonjour. I'm Valerie Powell, your Green Party candidate, and yes, you have seen me on the ballot before, twice federally and twice provincially. In the past, I ran enthusiastically with a full campaign team and funding. This time, I am running out of sheer determination because nasty political mudraking caused our nominated candidate to resign. Negative campaigning has migrated north to Canada and even Simcoe North, dividing and disgusting the voters and increasing voter apathy. In the past, candidates from all parties were respectful. I trust this respect and courtesy will continue in Simcoe North. The reason I am now running is to restore voter choice and democracy, and I'm so glad Angelique is also here, and to make sure all parties talk about the real issues, the ones you want debated tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I am passionate about the arts and seniors and community. Growing up in Aurelia gave me opportunities, and I was lucky enough to attend the Ontario College of Art, marry my high school sweetheart, who then became the Deputy City Engineer for City of Aurelia. I have been a practicing artist, a hobby farmer, and a small business owner with the Children's General Store in downtown Aurelia. I have served as an executive director with the Lung Association and later with the Alzheimer's Society. I contributed a weekly story to CBC Ontario Morning and later became their arts journalist. We raised 2 children in a schoolhouse in Oromadonte. At 40, I returned full-time to university. With a Master's of Science in Gerontology research, I then spent the next 20 years in healthcare, consulting to hospitals, long-term care, and community throughout Simcoe County. We now live in Aurelia. Both our children work full-time in the arts, and I am once again trying to spend time creating art. Woven throughout this history, and I am a weaver, are many of you who have personally touched my life and made it richer. My dedication to cultural, social, and environmental issues is what drives me to volunteer for local organizations. Most recently, Aurelia Sunshine Initiatives and the Alzheimer's Society Board. My personal goal is to make Aurelia an official age-friendly and dementia-friendly community. I am the seniors critic for both Green Party of Ontario and Green Party of Canada. My vision for a better future is reflected in Green Party values and policies. I believe that Green Party Elizabeth May provides a strong Green voice in Parliament and will lead to create a more sustainable future for my children's children's children. I am proud to run in Simcoe North and would be proud to represent you in Ottawa.
Thank you, Valerie. We move to the Christian Heritage Party and Chris Brown.
Hello, my name again is Chris Brown, and I'm your candidate for the Christian Heritage Party, CHP. We are Christians that strongly believe in and represent the Christian heritage that formed our laws and freedoms and built this once beautiful nation, and that a return to godly principles is indispensable to any true hope. Even though I'm a candidate, I'm not your typical politician. I am as concerned for the spiritual welfare for my fellow Canadians as I am for the future of our nation. I'm all for sound policies, and even though the CHP has plenty of such, these alone will offer no remedy for the slippery slope Canada is now on. Indeed, even if there is a remedy. The once great Christian heritage that framed our country's foundations and is reflected throughout our charter is today broadly mocked, even by our leaders. The end results of years of spiritual neglect and poor leadership has led Canada astray. We see our rapidly changing society, and many are deeply troubled with how wrong is now right and where this will all take us. Only a country that embraces God's counsel can have any hope of general prosperity, and Canada has rejected this. We no longer acknowledge God in the public square, immorality has become commonplace, and we kill our unborn for mostly convenience sake. We have redefined the core units of society, the traditional family and marriage of one man to one woman, and now promote the unscientific concept of fluid genders. Have we crossed the line with God already? I have no doubt whatsoever that we have lost his blessings. Scripture speaks of a day of judgment upon this age of man, and I am of the opinion that such a time is no longer coming. It has already begun. I've heard it said that liberalism is destroying our country, but the truth is that no one party or mindset is without guilt. All involved have either directly or indirectly brought us to where we are today. Without God's guidance in our parliamentary halls, our representatives have made one bad decision after another that have affected the very fabric of our society. As that fabric unwinds, social ills will escalate, straining limited resources and spiraling us towards a rapidly approaching cultural collapse. No amount of political fixing is going to change anything for the better so long as we continue to push God out of the public and political square. But what about separation of church and state, some of you might say? This often quoted statement has been twisted over the years to give people the thought that the church was not to interfere with the state. The truth is actually the opposite. The state was not to interfere with the church. CHP has great ideas to address the issues: taxes, immigration, capital expenditures, and more. The other parties have ideas too. Some you'll like, some you'll find better than others. But as our expressed faith in God dwindles, so do our chances of a decent future. The time is now to get right with God through Christ and to elect leaders that will abide by their faith and bring God's guidance back to Parliament. Thank you.
And thank you, Chris Brown. We now move to the Liberal candidate, Jerry Hawes. Jerry?
Thank you to the organizers of this forum this evening to discuss issues that are very important to voters. And thank you to all of you for attending. It's a great crowd tonight, and to all of you who are watching this on television. I'm grateful that the issues of affordability, equity, and climate change are coming up as serious issues of discussion in this election campaign. I am a lifelong resident of the area. I live in Orillia. I grew up in a low-income, blue-collar family. My parents instilled the values of work, hard work, fairness, equity, and inclusion in us children, as well as the value of public service. My brother became a police officer, my sister a soldier, and the three of us charted a course through careers with a social mission. I have devoted much of my life to community building, and I look forward to being able to bring that dedication and experience to Ottawa to make it work for you. I decided to run because I heard from my friends, my family, and my neighbours that they were concerned about the cuts they're seeing in Ontario. The Ontario government is squeezing healthcare services, increasing class sizes, and imposing other negative impacts on our communities. And they have a real fear, my friends, neighbours, and family have a real fear of a possible Conservative government in Ottawa. That would be a double whammy for us. It would be really bad news. That's one of the main reasons why I decided to run. I am also running to provide strong progressive representation to the people of Simcoe North. I have a record of delivering results. I was a key player in reestablishing the Mariposa Folk Festival back here in Orillia, and I've been a leader in that organization for the past 20 years. I served as a surrogate to our former Liberal Member of Parliament, Paul de Valère, when he was a cabinet minister. And for the past 10 years, I have been helping to grow the cultural industries in Ontario with their clean, quality jobs. I know how to effectively serve this community, and I have the experience to get things done. The Liberal government has made tremendous strides in the first 4 years of this government, like creating 1.1 million new jobs in Canada, most of them full-time, taking steps to make housing more affordable, and investing in Canadians by implementing the Canada Child Benefit and increasing income supports to seniors, lifting more than 1 million Canadians out of poverty, the first major reduction in poverty we've seen in Canada in a very long time. This election is about continuing to move forward with that good work. The choice in this election is clear. Either we will elect a Conservative government and go back to the policies of Stephen Harper and the cuts to vital services that we're seeing with Doug Ford, or we will choose to move forward and build on the progress we've made together as Canadians. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech.
Okay, thanks very much, candidates. Appreciate your comments. We're now going to move to the advanced questions. You all received copies of these questions, and just for the benefit of these questions were selected and developed through a survey of public stakeholders and ranking of the questions by Simcoe North constituents. So the 4 highest ranked questions will be asked of each candidate and have been provided in advance to the teams. So each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for a response. So we'll start with the very first question. First question is on housing, and its housing is extremely expensive in Simcoe County for all age groups and cohorts. Development of farmland has expanded housing capacity, but has not resulted in housing affordability or accessibility. What specific federal legislation, action, or policies would you propose to remedy this? And we're going to start with Stephen Mack. Stephen.
Thank you. I take exception to the premise of this question, namely that housing is extremely expensive in Simcoe County. Compared to where? I moved from Toronto a few years ago, and I can tell you this area is a relative bargain. Assuming that the main concern behind this question is about affordability for low-income residents, I had a look at various ads for rentals. I found basic rentals in Orillia and Midland for under $600 per month and some 2-bedroom units for under $1,400. That's roughly 30% of the net income of somebody who's making $15 per hour. Not great, but affordable. I have to assume then that the issue is of the quantity of available units or availability of employment. The People's Party would address a wide swath of voter affordability concerns, including housing, through overarching policies that boost the economy and maximize economic freedom. We would reduce income taxes at all income levels and simplify the tax code to have only 2 tax brackets. The personal exemption would be raised to $15,000 to get those struggling the most able to avoid income tax altogether. We would reduce corporate income taxes from 15% to 10% and phase out the capital gains tax. You might ask, well, how's that got to do with housing? But that will make it more attractive to Canadians to take the entrepreneurial route. If you can't find a good job, make one. Reducing the burden on businesses, which includes landlords, will make it more attractive for developers to invest in more affordable housing. Lower cost housing faces tighter margins, and very few points of relief can have a big impact. With all socioeconomic policies, the PPC would focus on root causes, understanding them fully and addressing them where we can with the resources we have. We favor solutions that are local and as personal as possible.
Thank you, Stephen. Can we move to Valerie Powell, please?
There are 2 parts to this. There's the development of farmland, and I don't think the Green Party would see the necessity in more sprawl taking up farmland when we could intensify the density of housing within dedicated communities. I really question the $600 rental. From what I hear from people, you can get something for $100, but if you like mold and basement apartments that don't have any light, that's maybe what you get. So you have to not just look at the cost of rental in Orillia, but the quality of it. The Green Party feels that although the Liberal government's housing strategy has addressed some of the issues of core housing, it doesn't address the immediate issues and needs to be strengthened. Since the 70s, we've languished in our support of purpose-built rental housing, co-ops, rental housing, social housing, and supporting housing. We have lengthy policies and points in our platform. Some of them are direct investment by the federal government. Example, legislate housing as a legally protected fundamental human right for all Canadians and permanent residents. Eliminating the first-time buyer's guide, creating a Canada co-op housing strategy. There are financing points that I won't bother reading. Restoring tax incentives for purpose-built. A lot of the core Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation financing and policies are important, but the Green Party is also innovative. They want to see more choices for seniors, more supportive housing, shared units, assisted living, cluster care so people can stay in their communities, and enable innovative solutions, tiny houses, innovative designs, etc.
Thank you, Valerie. Okay, Chris Brown, Christian Heritage Party, your turn.
Thank you. Housing availability and pricing is supply and demand basics, but it doesn't end there. Toronto and other big cities have experienced certain unrestricted buying practices that have been responsible for lopsided house pricing and have pushed first-time buyers out of the market, or at least further out from preferred locations. This has in turn affected prices and availability in rural areas. This is the problem with things like money laundering and foreign speculators, artificially driving up prices. Great if you're a seller, but not if you're a buyer. We can see that in some places this has crushed the dreams of home ownership and exploded rental pricing. Having a place to call home, a place to take pride in, is vital to more than just the economy. It is one of those issues that crosses economic lines into the vitality of social and community atmosphere that builds and stabilizes our social fabric. One common sense solution would be to restrict home ownership to Canadian residents only. Another problematic area of the housing market is the high divorce rate, and that in turn puts pressure on existing housing availability. When two homes are needed when only one used to do, addressing family unity becomes important in more ways than one. But the affordability crisis is not just a problem of foreign speculators and weakened families. Towering debt levels have hamstrung government initiatives. The giving of tax breaks to increase rental supply would be a helpful contribution, so long as the owners of these units are Canadian residents. Otherwise, it could lead to rising costs again. I think homeownership should be a government priority and could be made more attainable through CHP's plan to revamp the Bank of Canada, making low to zero rate loans available to provinces, which in turn could be used to build varying levels of co-op housing with ownership incentive and decent profit-sharing plans for buyers and sellers. A citizenship test for real estate buyers, a tax break to increase rental units, and a pathway to build affordable housing, that's a good start to address this issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris Brown. Now we move to Liberal candidate Jerry Haas.
Every Canadian deserves a safe and affordable place to call home. We slid backwards during the 10 years of the Conservative government, who did nothing despite the profound need for action. And it is no wonder that my Conservative opponent is afraid to be here tonight to discuss this issue and other issues of social equity. With Canada's first ever national housing strategy, the Liberal government is addressing housing needs across the spectrum, from reducing homelessness to investing in affordable housing to helping Canadians purchase their first home. This is a $40 billion plan, and we're just getting started. We are supporting our most vulnerable with a focus on the needs of seniors, women and children fleeing family violence, Indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, and young adults. In 2019, the Liberals also launched the first-time home buyer incentive to help middle-class Canadians take their first step towards home ownership. This incentive makes home ownership more affordable for first-time buyers by allowing them to lower their monthly mortgage payments without increasing their down payment. There is much good that has happened, but there's much more to do, and the national housing strategy that the Liberal government has put in place is the first major initiative to tackle this in many, many years, and we're already off to a good start in making progress.
Thank you, Jerry. Angelique.
Every Canadian should have access to equitable housing. The NDP's National Housing Strategy will ensure that all Canadians across Canada have the support that they need to be able to afford to live in a comfortable home. The NDP government will first begin with a $5 billion investment in all housing strategies across Canada to ensure that we can meet the goals and needs of all citizens across Canada. Living in rural communities such as ours, we understand as North Simcoe residents that we need quality, affordable housing regardless of job, gender, and employment status. The New Democratic Party will ensure that there are 500 new units of affordable housing created across the country, with half of that being built in the first 5 years. Not only this, but we're going to invest in current homeowners who need vital retrofits in order to guarantee that they can save money on everyday things such as water, heating, and electricity. And we want to make sure that those retrofits are mindful of the climate change that we're currently experiencing in our country. Our government is looking to provide immediate relief for those who are struggling to make ends meet, and guarantees that on the first day of office that we will make strides to connect with those who are needing it the most. We also are going to work with the CMHC to ensure that insured mortgages are reintroduced on a 30-year term, which can ensure that there are smaller monthly payments for each person who's paying a mortgage in Canada. We'll also contribute tax credits of up to $1,500 to closing costs for new home buyers. We'll also impose a foreign buyer's tax to fund our housing strategy. We believe that those who are profiting off of having houses here in Canada but may not live here deserve to contribute to the communities who live here. So, thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Those are all interesting and great answers. Thanks for your responses. We're going to move to our next question. And increased frequency of flooding and forest fires point to the detrimental effect of climate change on Simcoe North residents. The international scientific community has come together, clearly stating that it is essential to undertake climate change action and environmental preservation sooner than later. Most people have concluded that we need to do something different this point forward. What federal legislation, policies, or actions on climate change and environmental damage would you propose? And we're going to start with Valerie Powell of the Green Party. Valerie?
I just printed something off before I left, which I'd lost, but I won't worry about it. It's a criticism of our plan, and I think that's good. The Green Party is best known for its action and advocacy and fighting for the environment and making sure that climate change and the climate emergency is addressed. We have a brochure which you can get from our booth or online called Mission Possible, because as dire as Greta Thunberg says, our house is on fire, as dire as the situation is, we can come up with an action plan to ensure that we are carbon neutral by 2050 or sooner. So our 20-step climate action plan The first thing after declaring it a climate emergency is to establish an inner cabinet of all parties, because we can't do anything unless all parties collaborate and work together on this crisis. And if we all keep fighting about it, every party has a good idea and can bring it to the table, and we need to work together. Years ago, the Green Party was talking about transitioning. It's too late to transition the way we had planned to train the workers in the tar sands slowly into new green energy fields. We can still do it, but we've got to speed it up. We have to set stringent new targets. Any of you who've been attending the lecture series, who had all the different lectures on climate change, know the numbers. They're not good, and we need to do something now, and we have a plan.
Thank you, Valerie. Christian Heritage Party, Chris Brown, please.
Well, hang on to your seats. Is climate changing? Yes, it is. But it's always been changing. Are man's CO2 emissions primarily responsible for changes in our climate? Many scientists say no, and they're actually making the Earth the greenest it's been in a long time. You've heard that 97% of scientists agree that man is causing global warming, but there are over 31,000 scientists who have signed an anti-man-made global warming pact. Most scientists are just like the rest of us, and when they're dependent on government funding, they're savvy enough to see the direction that funding is going. When funded research is looking for a particular outcome, you're darn shooting you're going to get the results you paid for. And the government has picked the one they can tax. What a surprise. That alone ought to raise enough eyebrows, but throw in the statement that the science is settled, then we need better research. Consider this. The climate heated dramatically around the 1100s, known as the medieval warm period, and then cooled dramatically around the 1600s, known as the Little Ice Age. Man-made carbon levels during either of those times were not a factor. Those citing the science behind this supposed crisis use charts and graphs that usually only go back to the 1980s. These graphs do indeed show a steady warming, a lessening of Arctic ice, rising levels in seas beginning at those dates, but why don't they go back any further than that? All of those graphs go back over 100 years. The reason becomes plain as day when the rest of those graph histories are revealed. Without fail, they all expose the fraud behind the statistics currently being used to deceive the public. Arctic ice levels go up and down but show no trend in either direction. Sea levels, they've been going the same way for eons. In the 1900s, you had recorded highs way beyond today, bitterly cold winters, 120-degree temperatures, swarms of tornadoes. CHP supports practical environment laws and expanded climate research.
Thank you, Chris Brown. And just want to remind our audience to try to, I know some of these things can be quite emotional, but try to just hold it down just a snick. Anyway, thanks. We're going to move now to Liberal Jerry Hawes.
Climate action cannot wait. There is no more issue more important to our future than fighting climate change. That's why the Liberal team have a strong plan to clean the environment and grow our economy at the same time, and it's working for Canadians. Pollution is no longer free in Canada. And while applying a price on pollution, the government, the Canadians together have created 1.1 million jobs since 2015. With our plan, we're taking real action to fight climate change, and the economy will grow at the same time, and the vast majority of Canadians can be better off while we do it. The Liberal government is taking action to reduce emissions and adapt to climate change across all sectors, from industry to buildings, transportation, and agriculture. This means using clean electricity to power our homes, workplaces, vehicles, and industries, and using energy more efficiently. It also means more resilient infrastructure and ecosystems that can better withstand the changes to climate, which are happening in real time. And it means expanding protected areas and parks with a whole host of new important conservation measures. Here are just some of the 50 initiatives that have been taken in the first term of this government. Like I mentioned, putting a price on pollution. For the first time ever, we're putting a price on pollution and putting money back in the pockets of Canadians. Investing in better public transit in communities across Canada and supporting renewable energy and investing in energy-efficient buildings. The Liberal plan on climate change it's a 50-point plan in the first term, but we're building upon that progress with Canadians. And going forward, we're committing to a net zero carbon emissions by 2050 through legally binding 5-year milestones based on the advice of scientists, economists, other experts, and consultations with Canadians. As an example, one of the measures that will be taken is to cut in half the corporate income tax on clean energy, clean technology businesses. That's the Liberal plan.
We now move to Angelique, NDP party.
The NDP is the Green New Deal. We have the boldest of climate plans across all parties currently running in Canada. Climate change is real, and it's the direct reason why residents of Simcoe North have to struggle with fears around forest fires and flooding. The NDP is committed to working with communities and municipalities to address concerns with contingency plans, that directly work with those who are affected by these everyday crisis concerns. We are currently needing to continuously respond to climate crises when we should be investing in adapting the infrastructure that directly curbs climate concerns and with energy-efficient homes. On the first day of office, the NDP promises to eliminate all fossil fuel subsidies to fossil fuel industries. This will free up $3.3 billion for Canadians to utilize for social services across Canada. Canadians need a stronger voice in all issues that affect them related to climate change, and especially around issues that affect the territories that they call home. We have an ambitious science-based greenhouse gas reduction target that we aim to use to stabilize the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're going to have a Climate Accountability Office to do regular audits of progress towards our climate goals. It's also important to keep in mind that tree planting is a vital part of sustaining our current nature and environments. And therefore, we're going to have a dedicated approach to tree planting to help empower and lower our carbon footprint. And most importantly, we will ban single-use plastics across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. People's Party, Stephen Mack.
Alarmism, hysteria, and panic is not how mature citizens address serious issues. It must be made clear that denouncing hysteria does not equate with climate change denial. The PPC is a free speech party, and we insist that all scientists be free to pursue their work without ideological or political interference. For science to work, it must be constantly open to debate and challenge. It is never settled, at least not when it's done right. The mechanisms of greenhouse warming make sense, but climate is an incredibly complex system that is not yet completely predictable. I find it highly unlikely that we are at the cusp of a hockey stick bend to runaway catastrophe, as alarmists have been claiming for over 40 years now. I agree with Greta in that the UN isn't terribly effective, and we're skeptical of their attempts to herd the nations of the world. And I realize that we must be realistic about the odds of convincing the dominant emitters like the USA, China, and India to change their ways to any significant degree. Furthermore, we must be wary of what I call greenuism, or the cynical use of climate fears as a justification for the dismantling of Western capitalist civilization, whether deliberately or by well-intentioned fiddling. We certainly do not want to deliberately destroy our economy in the fervor to just show we're doing something. We need a thriving economy and a confident and productive technology workers to discover and implement the energy solutions for the future. We believe that the only sustainable way to effect change in the behavior of the citizenry, in this case with respect to carbon, is to get them to voluntarily change of their own volition. Punishing them with a carbon tax is not going to work and will create resistance. The PPC will invest in infrastructure that we need anyway, but will take into account any possible climatic factors and the best science to ensure a good, secure quality of life for Canadians for generations to come.
That completes the climate change question. Now we move on to the very next question, which surprises me because healthcare is a provincial, but obviously this has come up in concerns amongst voters here in Simcoe North. Healthcare quality, coverage, and access has been vacillating for years since Medicare was introduced in Canada in the 60s. There is concern that the high standards of our Canadian healthcare are being diluted. Would you support a Canada-wide healthcare system with full coverage, care, and services across all provinces and territories? Why or why not? So we'll start with Chris Brown of the Christian Heritage Party for this one. Chris?
Thank you. Canadian healthcare is a real privilege, but it is not perfect. Canadians wait in line sometimes for long periods for urgently needed attention. Precious health dollars are spent on elective procedures such as abortion and gender reassignment surgery. These two procedures often lead to regret, depression, and suicide. Gender reassignment studies indicate a 20-fold increase in suicide. This is not health care and is a misuse of tax dollars. Canadians should not be forced to subsidize elective procedures, especially ones that they have deep moral concerns about. CHP would defund these elective surgeries, freeing more resources to help address issues like wait times. We believe more emphasis needs to be placed on preventative care and alternative medicines. Healthcare is primarily a personal responsibility, and that persistent efforts to educate Canadians on better options such as nutrition and exercise are important. Additionally, proper standards and labeling of health supplements would provide for more informed choices for personal health plans. We also propose compensation dollars for an in-home option for those able to do so, and could be aided by a bolstered already existing home care industry. CHP's capital expenditure reforms will provide much-needed provincial dollars to build state-of-the-art care facilities that would focus on privacy and prevention of the spread of disease. The $650 million the Liberals spent funding abortions overseas could have easily built 5 smaller regional hospitals that would serve local populations well. Waste and misuse are 2 areas where much funding can be found, but mixed with low to zero loan rates from our reforms, and the dollars for better service and care facilities are there. We believe the provincial healthcare structure is well established, and that the accountability to the provincial electorate and the flexibility afforded the local decision-making process is reason enough to keep things where they are. I believe addressing the issues of weakness and their solutions that I've identified here is the better approach to fixing our healthcare needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Move to Jerry Hawes.
Every Canadian deserves access to quality health care services. As a former policy advisor to Ontario's Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, I have unique perspectives and an understanding of our publicly funded healthcare system. Our publicly funded system is the cornerstone of economic opportunity and equality for Canadians. And it is a travesty to see the punitive cuts that are being put in place under Doug Ford. For example, the dissolving of the local health integration networks that make decision-making at the regional level instead of downtown at Queen's Park. And these types of steps are regressive, moving us backwards, not forwards. In their first term of office, the Liberals listened to Canadians and put forward a massive, much-needed investment of $11.5 billion to improve home care and mental health services across Canada. That is on top of the regular Canada Health Transfer, which increases by more than $1 billion per year. And we have a plan to make sure that every Canadian can afford the medication they need through a universal pharmacare plan, bringing down the cost of life-saving drugs for families through the rare disease drug strategy as well. I am proud of the Liberal track record of supporting, innovating, and protecting our healthcare system, but I believe that there's always ways we can do better. In the future, the federal government will have to negotiate with the provinces and territories, as has been the case with each new health accord. When that time comes, who do you want at the negotiating table to stand up to Doug Ford? Andrew Scheer, who follows Doug Ford's lead, or our Liberal team who will fight for you? I think the answer is pretty obvious.
Your turn, Angelique.
If I can say one thing, it's that I never want a single person in this room to have to worry about their healthcare needs. The NDP government supports a head-to-toe healthcare system because we understand that Canadians need healthcare to be well, to take care of themselves and take care of their communities. Many Canadians know that they have the NDP to thank for the reason why we have healthcare today. And in honor of Tommy Douglas's legacy, we'd like to expand our current healthcare system to include pharmacare and extended health benefits. We think that your health card and not your credit card should be utilized to pay for your everyday prescriptions that you need to be well. We want to make sure that there's quality prescription drug coverage for every person across this country. Specifically here in Simcoe North, I've experienced how there is a big lack of mental health and support services for those who need it. And within our extended pharmacare and extended healthcare plan, mental health services would be available across the nation for all Canadian citizens that need it. We'll also cover significant benefits such as hearing care, dental care, and dental care. I believe that these things are important because not only do our older citizens need it, but our children are relying on these meaningful changes for them as well. If we have pharmacare, we'll have less visits to our hospitals, which we know, and specifically in Simcoe County, that there is a long wait list for many access to primary care services. We commit as an NDP government to tackle wait times in hospitals and to improve access to primary health care providers across the nation. Thank you.
Stephen Back, People's Party of Canada.
To answer the question, we would not support a centrally managed Canada-wide health program. We are satisfied with the fact that healthcare is a provincial responsibility, and in many ways, having the management closer to the people in this way is a good thing. In fact, we would change or repeal the Canada Health Act. We would take the $40 billion or approximate amount of Canada Health transfers, and instead of doing that, we would give up GST points of an equivalent amount to leave the responsibility for healthcare with the provinces, because after all, they're delivering it, and they better be responsible to the voters for the results. The federal government should not be a flow-through middleman on this and a distant meddler, even though the intentions may be good. This sort of approach would allow 10 or 13 different experiments to proceed, and I trust that all our provincial and territorial governments have the best interests of their citizens at heart, and I would like them to experiment the way they see fit to see what is the best method, and they should all collaborate and compare notes. As part of eliminating the Canada Health Act, we would also eliminate the monopoly that for delivery of care to only governments. Those promises that wish might want to try a private option, which scares a lot of people, but is a last-ditch backstop for those for whom the system has failed, possibly with the assistance of charities. It'll also keep the public system on its toes with a little bit of competition and perhaps a little bit of inspiration to get more aggressive and deliver the services as if the people who need them are customers, not subjects.
Thank you, candidates. We now move to question number 4. And question number 4, young people today frequent... Oh, sorry, did I miss Valerie? Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
We're more than a climate change party.
I'm terribly sorry.
Wait, we're not finished.
My apologies, please.
We are so fortunate to live in a country where we have universal health care. I can't imagine living in the States and possibly being bankrupt by a health crisis. The Green Party is committed to the principles of the Canada Health Act, and like some of the other parties, I think there's a national pharmacare project now that most all the parties are agreeing on to include pharmacare, and then we also feel that free dental care for low-income Canadians is important. We'd like to restore the federal-provincial health accord so that it strengthens the federal and the provincial health care system so that it doesn't matter where you live in the country, you'll have equal access to care. Mental health and rehabilitation services. We have an opioid crisis that needs to be dealt with. For Indigenous people, we implement the call to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, numbers 18 to 24, to improve health care. Indigenous people get a lesser health care and educational provisions, and that needs to be corrected. I also think it's important to rebuild traditional knowledge systems around healing and wellness, and the inclusion of traditional healing within mental wellness and home and community care programs. More mental health for sure, a suicide prevention strategy, and protecting our blood system so that we do not have to worry about the tainted blood that was a huge crisis. I can't even remember when, 20 years ago. My personal interest, of course, is to strengthen the dementia strategy so that people with dementia, which is a growing number, will get research and support.
Thank you, Valerie. And now we move to question number 4. Young people today frequently enter their first jobs already burdened with significant debt from post-secondary training and education. This can place a burden on families who aid or support them. What federal legislation, action, or policies would you propose to mitigate or end excessive student debt? This time we will start with Jerry Hawes, the Liberal candidate. Jerry?
Thank you. Student debt is a big problem, and it has been getting worse in face of higher post-secondary education costs, driven in no small part by the punitive cutbacks made by the Doug Ford Conservatives, the cousins of the Andrew Scheer Conservatives. The Liberal government recognizes and understands the challenges that young people face in today's economy, and they've taken effective action. We have increased the amount students can receive from the Canada Student Grants by 50%. And no student is required to pay back their Canada student loan until they're earning at least $25,000. Again, to step up where the province has cut back, the Liberals have also lowered the student loan interest rates and eliminated interest for the first 6 months, saving students about $2,000 on average. But the economic uncertainty that young people face goes beyond those who are able to attend post-secondary education. We are working hard to create good-paying jobs here in Canada to ensure that all Canadians can earn a living wage. Recognizing that the job market is evolving with green and the digital economy, we are investing in upskilling through initiatives like the Canada Training Benefit, where Canadians can continually upgrade their skills throughout their lives. And even beyond that, the first thing that the Liberal government did was to cut taxes for the middle class and raise them for the 1%. There's good work being done. The Liberal government is stepping up to support students and young people against the cutbacks of the Ford government, and we need to elect a government that will continue to stand up to Canadians and continue to stand up to provincial governments like the one we have here in Ontario. Thank you.
Angelique, your turn.
When we invest in education, our communities grow. I have single-handedly experienced the value of having a post-secondary education, and it's the reason why I'm grateful enough to be able to sit on the stage here today. But I recognize that many youth in the same circumstances of me do not have the same equal opportunities because they're burdened by student loans or student debts or are scared to attend post-secondary education because of the threat. It makes me upset when I hear that our current government has spent or has forgiven $6 billion worth of loans to big corporations, but are profiting off of making $6 billion off of charging student loan interest. Therefore, the NDP government will stop profiting from student debt the first day it comes into office. Not only this, but they'll dedicate themselves to ensuring that post-secondary education is a part of our public education system, so children can be taken care of from kindergarten to post-secondary. Education isn't only a provincial obligation. It's the responsibility of everyone to make sure that people in their communities have the right skills to build and grow the economies inside their own communities. Enough youth in our community are leaving because they don't see living at home as a viable option to utilize their education and knowledge bases. The NDP will invest in Canada student grants, which will open doors for many youth to attend post-secondary education without the burden of being backlogged by financial debt. Contributing to student success will ensure that there's job training for all youth across Canada and henceforth grow our communities. Thank you.
Stephen Mack, please.
The PPC does not have a platform plank or legislative agenda to specifically address post-secondary student debt. The NDP and Greens promised to eliminate post-secondary tuition or make it interest-free and essentially turn universities into public schools. The popular implication is that university is the right path for everybody, that you need to go there immediately after high school, and that the choice of what to learn on the taxpayer's dime should be totally open. We disagree. Free tuition or an easy loan policy will certainly buy votes from the young. Crushing student debt loads are certainly a problem for many people. However, these policies are not addressing root causes. 50% of student loan defaults are by dropouts. The taxpayer must not bail out failed students any more than they should bail out failed companies. We need to avoid getting to this point in the first place. Sorry, not everybody gets to be an astronaut, and very few of us are qualified to be one. Only the best and brightest need to go, and this is best funded by the students' families or by private scholarships or bursaries. Many courses of study have very little practical use in the real world. People should be free to study these if they want and at their own cost, but the broader citizenry should not need to fund more intersectional gender studies or medieval German literature grads than the market will bear. In many cases, it's wise to learn a trade first, learn how to earn, learn what your true passions are, save up for more school, and do it when you're ready. This is a question of personal, not government responsibility. Mentoring, maybe. One of my researchers found an interesting program in Indonesia, pardon my pronunciation, Karya Salemba Empat scholarships. It's a mutual aid society through which those who have already made it through university directly help their less wealthy compatriots and successive cohorts by selecting the best students through face-to-face interaction, helping them select the best course of study, and funding their education. I could see this sort of approach working perfectly in Canada.
Thank you, Stephen. We move now to the Green Party. Valerie Powell, please.
Well, I can see that we're all going to have to agree to disagree on this panel. The specific question is, what federal legislation, action, or policies would you propose to mitigate or end excessive student debt? One of our planks is to forgive the portion of existing student debt that is held by the federal government. Another is to make college and university tuition free for all Canadian students. I might point out that our platform is one of the few that is fully costed, which means that we have had economists look at what we propose and agree and give us a score usually as to how we are going to pay for it. So quite often when we put money into something, it's complex enough that we have to also look at the benefits and how we're going to get it out. We are hoping that even in Simcoe County, we can take the opportunity let's say at Georgian College, to retrain people to work in the new green economy. Maybe at Lakehead, and I know there's a few people here will appreciate this, we could develop a sustainable agriculture program that could be a center of excellence for the world. We have the ability at Lakehead and Georgian College to develop programs to train people for the future, not for jobs that aren't going to exist anymore. Dropouts. Most dropouts are push-outs. They're not dropouts. They have to work 2 or 3 jobs, maybe because their rent is so high because there's no affordable housing. There are many reasons why students drop out, and I think we can look at that as well and make life easier for them.
Chris Brown, please.
Thank you. Everyone would agree that opportunities for higher education are essential. High-tech and the sciences in particular need well-qualified people to advance those fields, and all benefit from their contributions. It is something to be thankful for. But as essential as these fields are, they are also time-consuming and expensive fields of training. Our shortage of doctors is just one example of this and illustrates the great need we have to ensure our leaders do all they can to meet those needs. Provincial initiatives such as OSAP loans and grants have helped students, but is it enough? Free tuition would be a student's dream, but it would certainly bring more numbers to address the shortages, but the expense to the taxpayers would be enormous. As it is, students with these loans are paying interest on them at the rate of prime plus 1% provincially and prime plus 2.5% federally. In Ontario, the 6-month grace period on interest due is gone. The prime rate in Canada is currently 3.95%. That makes provincial loans 4.95% and the federal loans 6.45%. Surely we can do better than that. Efforts to reduce tuition fees are laudable, and there is even some progress towards that. But why on earth is the government making money off of students and their families? We have the need for their eventual contributions, and we all benefit in shorter wait times and better service at our healthcare facilities. Taxation for free tuition would be too much, but we could greatly ease the burden of interest payments on loans, especially for the more essential, highly needed fields of study. CHP's capital expenditures reforms could just as easily apply to student loans, making them either prime or even just principal with no interest. Not quite free, but addresses both our country's needs and is not onerous to either the taxpayer or the student's family. A plan to help ease student debt is not just good for them, it's good for us all. By eliminating interest on their loans, we take a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Brown, and thank you, candidates. We've asked you the questions. Now, this is part of the program where you get to ask the questions of your fellow candidates. So just a reminder, you can ask 2 questions, and we will allow a response of 2 minutes, I believe, for the question. So, Angelique, we'll start with you. Do you have a question of any of the other candidates?
I do, for the People's Party of Canada candidate. I'm just wondering if you can clarify your views on multiculturalism in our country.
Sure, good one. I think multiculturalism is great, and ethnic diversity, cultural diversity, and all kinds of diversity are wonderful things, and they happen organically when people are free and get together. I totally support multiculturalism, but I do not see it as the business of government.
And Stephen, you got a question for one of the candidates?
Okay. I think I'll ask a little slightly crafty question of Jerry. If Bruce Stanton were here, what would you ask him?
If Bruce Stanton were here, I would ask him why his leader cannot speak from his heart on the issue of equal marriage. He obviously is very troubled by that. He made that speech in the House of Commons with his bigoted remarks and used an example of a dog in his speech against equal marriage. And, Canadians have moved well beyond that. We're a fair and decent country, but it's obvious that Andrew Scheer does not support equal marriage, and he's trying to cover that up, and they're giving these legalistic responses as to why it won't be an issue going forward, but it's nonsense. When the leader of the official opposition and potential future prime minister cannot speak from his heart on this matter, he cannot represent Canadians.
Valerie, your turn. A question for one of the other
I'm going to ask Jerry one, too. So the pipeline. Can you kind of tell me what you're actually going to do with that?
I would be more than happy to answer that question. It's a rhetorical question response for you, really, which is, why is it that we want Canada to be the only to be a captive supplier of oil to the United States, our only purchaser of oil, and selling it at a discount?
Not oil.
Yeah,
bitumen.
Well, okay, bitumen, you can, whatever technical term you want to use, you know what I'm talking about. The fact is we're selling it at a great discount. I don't see how that makes environmental or economic sense.
Then stop.
I think that we have to. I think that we have to be allow our producers to be able to export their product at a fair market value, and they can't get it right now because they don't have the ability to transport it properly. And trucks and trains. Look at Lake Megantic, that situation. That's a lousy way to transport fuel. And so I think that is a logical response to that question. I don't understand how it makes any environmental or economic sense to sell bitumen at a discount.
Chris Brown, question?
Sorry, Jerry. So, Jerry, Canada is being swallowed up by globalist forces. Just after the last election, Mr. Trudeau said Canada is a post-national state. Can you tell us what he meant by that?
Canada is a country of immigrants. We are a country that's strong because of our diversity and that tradition of welcoming people to our country. And we're also, relatively speaking, a small country. Our population is not growing very fast. And we do have to address the fact that it's an aging population and that in-migration is a needed thing. And I would add to that the in-migration that we're seeing, at least 60% of those people are economic class migrants. They're coming here as investors with expertise that industry requires and so on. So what he meant by that is that this is a great success story. We're a beacon to the world with our ability to absorb people from different cultures. It's a real strength of our country. It's one that I am personally very proud of, and that's what he meant by that comment.
Jerry, you get a chance. It's your turn. Yeah, you get a chance.
I will pick on my NDP colleague here now with a question. In recent days, the leader of the NDP has made the case for a provincial veto. I would like to know how this would work for programs where the government needs to act in the national interest, such as in pharmacare.
You retracted that.
I can retract it. I'd like to retract that question.
No. Jack retracted that
Sorry?
statement.
Sorry, I don't have enough information to answer that question, and I believe that it's my responsibility as the candidate for this party to provide an educated answer, and therefore I'd like to decline answering this question, but I'd gratefully like to give you a response back, Jerry.
And we still have the ability to ask another question. We still have time to do that. So let's start from the middle, and we'll ask Valerie Powell. Do you have another question you'd like to ask Jerry or any of the other candidates?
Well, I think I'll go for Jerry since Bruce isn't here. Fair voting. We had a promise the last election that this would be the last first-past-the-post election. It isn't. We're back in a first-past-the-post full-on race. Would you support a fair voting proportional system if you are elected?
So what I am personally supportive of as at least a first step to meaningful electoral reform is a ranked ballot where at the local level you could choose Jerry Hawes as your first choice, you could choose Valerie Powell as your second choice. And I'm getting there, Valerie, I'm not done answering the question. And with that type of a system, at least at the local level, if an MP, if a candidate doesn't get at least 50% on the first ballot, they get elected by popular consensus. That would be a meaningful step forward. On the issue of proportional representation, there have been 5 referendums across Canada that have failed, and I think that a much better discussion is required with Canadians before we can start going forward with that proposal, because Canadians, frankly, do not understand it very well, and that's why the referendums have failed.
PEI passed, but the Liberal Premier decided not to allow it anyway.
So the point is that there have been referendums in Canada that have failed, including in British Columbia just recently, with an NDP government propped up by the Green Party, and it failed miserably. So the point is that Canadians they don't understand it well enough to be able to make a decision on it. That's what I'm hearing from people, and that's why we should take the first step of at least having ranked balloting at the local level, because that is meaningful electoral reform, and who knows what could happen after that. That would start engaging Canadians in a meaningful way.
Chris, another question for one of the candidates?
Jerry, take a break. Valerie.
Yes.
Patrick Moore, the only scientist and founding member of Greenpeace, a one-time highly recognized and respected environmental group, firmly believes that climate data is being manipulated and used like propaganda to trick the public into supporting alarmist claims, designed to impose phony taxes that will actually do nothing to impact global climate. What do you say about that?
I think that's absolutely true, because we can take a scientist's word and do all kinds of things that don't make any difference. Look at A&W and their plant-based wrappers and compostable cups. I go to the local Toyota dealer, they've got compostable, biodegradable cups, a no composting bin. So you're right, they can greenwash anything. But the science from 38,000 other scientists, if it was put into reasonable actions, could make a difference. We're doing a lot of things that don't make a difference just because our capitalist system can make a little extra money off it. We need to have an actual action plan that addresses the problem. So yes, what he's maybe saying is that we're alarming people into doing things that don't make sense, when what we should be doing is maybe with less alarm, having a plan that makes sense.
Jerry, it gives you a chance to ask one of the other candidates a question.
Thank you. I'm going to return the favor to Valerie this time. The Green Party would have us ban foreign fuel imports. Aside from the international trade laws that would be impacted by this, if we are using Canadian domestic crude for gasoline for Canadians across the country, how exactly is it going to get to them? Will it be shipped? Will it be in more trains? Remember Lake Megantic? It would seem like the reasonable solution here would be have an infrastructure project to move it long distances. In other words, would the Greens be proposing a pipeline?
I think that if we don't need fuel in the future, the problem will be resolved that way. There is a problem in the transition period, and I think what Elizabeth May said, because we're always upgrading our policies, continuous policy improvement, I think that we have to allow for the fact that there are people working in the system, there is an infrastructure, and so we need to slowly phase it out. I mean, if the Canadian government wanted to bring in asbestos just because somebody needs it, doesn't mean we're going to allow it. If it's been proven that fuel of any kind is detrimental to the environmental action plan, then no, we don't need to import it or send it on trains, trucks, boats, or pipelines.
Sorry, I don't think that answers the question, but good try.
Maybe I missed the point.
Your leader said that foreign fuel imports would be banned, that we'd stop importing foreign fuel.
Perfect.
So how do we get the fuel to the markets in Canada? Is it going to be done by train? Is it going to be done by plane?
I thought I answered it. We don't need foreign fuel. You're talking about shipping our bitumen to the States.
We currently do rely on a substantial amount of foreign fuel.
Well, I obviously don't understand the oil industry, but if we're taking oil out and shipping it to the States in a $14 billion pipeline, why do we then have to import it? I mean, I know we've got an east-west problem, but the sooner we go to a green energy economy, the sooner we won't need to be building pipelines.
I would agree with you on that, but in the meantime, there are realities that come to play, and I'm just pointing out that that is a policy that's not very realistic or pragmatic, and you can't govern that way.
You're right, we need to transition.
Yeah.
But fast transition.
All right, thank you, candidates. And Angelique, question?
My question's for the Liberal candidate. Your government has prided itself on its nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples, and as an Indigenous person, I witnessed the violence that my Indigenous relatives experienced with the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and I'm wondering how your government can justify that violence experience and how they plan to move forward with a trusting relationship with Indigenous peoples.
So the relation with Indigenous peoples, that government-to-government relationship, is the most important relationship of this Liberal government. And a lot of work has been done to repair the relationship and to respond to the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. When it comes to the pipeline that you referenced, there's actually a lot of First Nations that want to partner on that. There's no unanimity whatsoever. There's no consensus among the First Nations community. And the government has a responsibility to balance the interests of all interested parties in a decision like that. And if that pipeline goes through, there's going to be First Nations that are going to benefit from it in a very significant way. They say they want to benefit from it and they want to own it. I think that is the kind of future relationship we should be having with First Nations in Canada.
If I may mention one thing for consideration for your government, it's that they listen to our traditional laws and government systems and not yours.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That your government consider listening to our traditional governance systems and not yours. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. The government is, in fact, speaking to First Nations as First Nations. It's a government-to-government relationship that we have, and those are the discussions that they're having with the traditional governance of the First Nations that are interested in partnering.
Stephen, you have an opportunity to ask a question, please.
This question's for Valerie. By what means and with what authority do you propose using to dismantle the capitalist economic system, which appears to be an obstacle between where we are now and the green future?
I don't think we do plan to dismantle it. We are not only environmentally interested in environmental sustainability, but also economic sustainability. We support small business, and I think maybe I'm wrong, but I would think we might be called social capitalists, which means that we think that businesses should be allowed to invest, make money, treat their employees well, give them a fair wage, be innovative, do research. We don't have a problem with business. We have a problem with business that takes advantage of its employers and the environment. And that is where our line is.
Well, thank you, candidates. So we've come to the end of that part of the program, and I have more questions here, but we're running a little ahead of schedule as opposed to behind schedule, which is a good thing. So I'm just going to prepare the audience if somebody has a question that they would like to ask the panel. and not to a specific person, but allow everybody to address it. I'll give you a chance to think about what it is that you might like to ask, and I'll give you an opportunity shortly to do that. But first, we're going to go back to a couple of more questions, and we're going to go back to the environment, and I'd like you to follow the next question. These are questions that you haven't received, I don't think, ahead of time. Many Canadians know that our country has the longest coastline in the world, and less well known is that Canada is home to roughly half the world's lakes and roughly 10% of the world's wetlands. Canada is seeing the impact that industrial development and climate change is having on our water resources. We are seeing the reemergence of pollution hotspots like Lake Erie. What can the federal government do to work with different sectors such as industry, municipalities, farmers to reduce both water pollution and the risk of flood events aggravated by commercial development and climate change? And we're going to start with Angelique, please.
It's time to enshrine in law our right to a healthy environment. Protecting our oceans from coast to coast should be a priority for all Canadians across Canada. New Democrats promise to enact a national freshwater strategy to work with provinces and territories to protect our waterways under international agreements. It's important that we keep in mind our waste management solutions and recycling programs in order to protect our oceans from coast to coast. New Democrats will protect 30% of our land, freshwater, and oceans by 2030 and back those protections with funding and enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen.
PPC believes in clean drinking water, clean lakes, and prices on pollution. However, water issues are a hodgepodge of jurisdictional conflicts. For example, oceanic issues are under federal jurisdiction. Generally, inland lakes are provincial, yet the Great Lakes have certain binational agreements. We would favor simplifying these things. Strong regulations to prevent pollution of waterways is important, and where there is federal jurisdiction, I would certainly support those laws and even strengthening them. However, things like land use, marshes, and things like that, those are provincial or municipal, and we have to leave it to those levels of government.
And Valerie.
I'm not sure. We're talking three things, perhaps. One is climate change, where our oceans are going to rise and cause excessive human and environmental catastrophes. And that means a full global climate action plan. The other is the pollution, which we have to address. We could use all those plastic straws that we want to get rid of and build little mini pipelines and get all the oil where it needs to go until we get rid of them. So we do have to clean up the environment. The third thing is we need to mitigate the damage, even locally, from the flooding of Lake Ontario, the damage that's been done to the communities there, Georgian Bay, even the rivers. We need to have municipal and other acts to make room for the rivers and the ecosystems.
Christian Heritage Party, Chris Brown, please.
Thank you. I echo some of the things that my colleague from the PPC party said. The marshlands and the wetlands, I mean, those are vital ecological things that we have. We must have them in order to maintain balance. Our waterways and our management of those waterways, the flood management, I mean, we have made some great progress in some of that areas. I mean, it certainly could be looked at, but in terms of where we stand and as far as the environment goes, I mean, we're all behind environmental laws. Whatever damage is done, that it needs to be rebuilt. I mean, you know, for I mean, in logging industries, we already have loggers replanting trees and stuff like that. Those are great projects. For the oil sands, we've got things that we could look at that maybe could be improved, but every one of these things have issues attached to them, and they all need to be looked at, but we do support environmental laws. Thank you.
And Jerry Haas, please.
So one of the things that the Liberal government did in this first term of office was develop the Oceans Protection Plan. It's the first time we've had that. It's a $1.5 billion plan to protect our ocean shorelines. But obviously, the health of our water goes well beyond that. Of particular concern to me is with climate change, the real climate change is actually really happening to us right now. We're seeing drought conditions in some places, flooding conditions in others. I'm very fearful of what's happening in the United States, in the southwestern United States, where there are many places, like huge populations, distant from good supplies of water. And to date, we've had a reliable partner in the United States with the Great Lakes Joint Commission, but who knows how much longer they're going to be willing to not let water be pipelined wholesale down to those locations. I think that's something that we have to be very, very wary of.
Thanks very much, candidates. Do we have a roving mic? So if somebody, I'm ready to take a question from the audience. If we could do that now, please.
Your name and where you're from.
And the first person that will respond to this question will be Stephen.
Okay.
Go ahead, please ask your question.
Is the question going to all the candidates?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I ran for office on that table 4 years ago. And there's a number of ethical undertakings that the Liberal Party took. One was to balance the budget. One was to end first past the post. The third one was to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. The fourth was to run the Canadian government ethically. And this Prime Minister has 2 ethical violations against him. I would like the comment from all 5 candidates on the moral fundings of the Liberal government that I just pointed out. Thank you.
So you've packed a lot of stuff into that question.
Yes. So basically the question is,
oh, sorry.
He's gone through and outlined a number of promises that were made in the last election. What would your party or what would you do to ensure that the promises that you're making for us today are respected? We'll start with Stephen.
Okay, I don't disagree with some of the things you're saying, but I think that the position is perhaps a little harsh. The premise is, I mean, all governments face surprises, and so I might give them a little bit of a break, but I agree that there have been ethical lapses. What I'd like to point out is that, yeah, this time it happened to be the Liberals. Before that, it was the Conservatives. Before that, it was the Liberals. Are you starting to see the pattern? It's time to break this duopoly and get rid of this nonsense. So I'm not blaming either of them. Please, from where I stand, it looks like a 2-winged beast that is fluttering about, and it's time to try something new. You have lots of options here. Please think about them.
Valerie, your turn.
That's a 4-part question. 3 of them, I'm not sure why things happen. It's hard to get to the truth. We all have opinions, and we can do something about them when we vote this time. If we had proportional representation, as promised of a fair voting system, it would be a whole lot easier voting right now because you could vote for who you wanted to without having to think strategically. So that's the one part of his promises, which he said in the throne speech. He said over and over, many people voted for him just for that. The large commission that he created gave a report which recommended a proportional system. So there's no excuse for that little fib, for sure.
Chris Brown, please.
Thank you. I think there's been a couple of good points made here. There are surprises when governments come in, no doubt about that. I think, though, on a couple of these issues, I don't think we can excuse the Liberal government that easily, though. The balanced budget, I mean, if everyone remembers, it's like, hey, you know, this wasn't going to happen, and all of a sudden it is. I think that's a choice. As far as the first past the post and the reforms and stuff like that, that was a good promise to make, and it would have been great if he followed through with it. Why did he stop? I mean, it was his choice to stop. There wasn't anything forcing him from previous conditions and stuff. I think, you know, the ethical violations, I mean, he came out himself and said that, you know, he comes from a privileged background and stuff. And, you know, I think that really does influence a lot of the things he does and says. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a part of him that does think he's a little different than everybody else. So, but I don't want to make that personal. Okay, thanks.
Jerry, your turn.
So that was a four-part question where I have a 1-minute answer. So the only way I can answer that question is to say that I think that we have to make sure that we elect very strong local members of parliament who can go to Ottawa and speak truth to power and not be afraid to do that. And that very often happens. New members of parliament get elected and they get corralled. They don't want to make too much noise. They don't want to upset the apple cart, so they get in line and do what they think that the party wants them to do. I'm a person who's very confident, have a lot of experience over the past 30 years in this area, and as your member of parliament, I will speak truth to power and I will speak on your behalf. And when I see things that I think are unethical or crossing the line or just uncomfortable for me, I will speak loudly and clearly about that.
Angelique, your turn.
I believe the ethical shortcomings of the Liberal government should demonstrate that people across Canada should hold governments more accountable to do better by them. The NDP is fiscally responsible, endorses proportional representation, and is leading in climate leadership. So with that, I leave you to think of us.
All right, candidates, I ask you to turn your attention to the following question. Baby boomers are coming of age, and the need for long-term care and other seniors' options for living independently or assisted is only going to get greater. What does your party plan to do about our increasing need for quality, affordable, long-term care? And we're going to start with the Green Party, Valerie Powell, please.
As a seniors critic, I have a lot of input into the platform. Seniors aren't always like the top sexy priority for the government, but we are growing in such numbers that we are demanding a new quality of life. We are committed to an expanded, strengthened national dementia strategy, which will help fund research and community care, even though that will have to be negotiated, obviously, with the provincial governments. We support age-friendly communities. I chair the Aurelia Advisory Committee. And when we think long-term care, I hope we don't think long-term care homes. They do the best they can, but that's not the choice, and that's not where most older people want to be. And what most people want is choice. And when you have a choice between your private residence and full care, there are a lot of options in the middle.
We move to Chris Brown, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, the boomer generation, rapidly approaching that stage in their lives. CHP has long held that adequate care and facilities are a must in order for healthcare needs to be met. Again, I come back to our capital expenditures reforms that we've talked about before. these loans that can be given to the federal government and then passed on at the same rates to provincial governments can go a long way to building state-of-the-art care facilities, whatever infrastructure is needed to meet these needs. I think we also have the idea of helping people to stay in home, willing family members, willing and able family members that can meet as many of those needs in home. I think the ideal is to try and keep people, seniors, in home as long as they can. That's where they're most comfortable. Thank you.
All right, Jerry, your turn, please.
Yep, thank you. I mentioned earlier that I was a policy advisor to Ontario's Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. Long-term care was my file. That was my major preoccupation in that work, and I got to know a lot about the long-term care system and the home care system. The federal government, as I mentioned earlier, has invested $11.5 billion in home care and mental health services. That's on top of the Canada Health transfer, which increases by more than $1 billion per year. So the federal government has recognized that that is a big problem across Canada and has stepped up to the plate with additional funding so that we can improve home care across the country. And the National Housing Strategy that I mentioned earlier as well also is one of the arrows in that quiver of addressing that challenge that is faced by seniors, who will soon be 20% of our population. So the federal government is taking it seriously, and it needs to work closely with the provincial governments to address these challenges. And I think we would be well served by having a Liberal government doing that instead of an Andrew Scheer government negotiating with Doug Ford.
Angelique?
Aging populations need better access to quality home care and long-term care. That's why the National Democratic Party will develop national care standards for home care and long-term care that will be amended into the Canada Health Act. I believe that with our extended healthcare head-to-toe pharmacare and healthcare benefits for Canadians, aging populations won't have to worry about the pharmacare coverage that they desperately need to fund their medications. Housing is a priority, and accessible housing for aging populations must be acknowledged. We guarantee within the National Democratic Party that we'll provide that for senior citizens. It is important to keep in mind that senior citizens also rely heavily on income security, and therefore will explore better options to take care of our aging populations through various income security support programs.
Thank you, Angelique. Now, Stephen, please.
The boomers have done pretty well. I'm actually a bit more worried about the people that come after. But as far as questions about seniors, I don't think there's any government or force or group or anyone that's against helping seniors. So I have a certain faith that the Canadian people want to take care of their seniors, and at the municipal, provincial, or federal level, when issues come up, I think the basic goodness of Canadians is going to make sure it all works out as best it can. But what we would propose is just doing our job right as a government, making sure the economy is thriving, that the gross domestic product is good and can support the services, and that people, particularly that the Canada Pension Plan is secure. I have certain worries about that, and a PPC government would be making sure that that is solvent in a low interest rate and difficult investment environment.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're going to move back to the audience for a question. I believe we have one over here. Please.
Yes, thank you. Congratulations to all the candidates for stepping up, and thank you to Aurelia for Democracy for putting this on. I have a question about your priorities as an MP. Assuming you are privileged with election to the 43rd Parliament, you're either going to go in and be a minister or a backbench MP. Let's assume that the cabinet's not going to happen right away. So two things you will be doing as a backbench MP is you will be able to table private members' legislation, and you will sit on numerous committees. I'd like to know what would be the first bill you would introduce And second, which committee would you like to get posted to? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. And we're going to ask Chris Brown to start this round, please. Chris?
Well, first off, I'd have to say me getting there would be an act of God. First thing I would do is give thanks. But I think, I mean, one of my biggest planks is abortion. And so, of course, one of my first things to table would be that. I would be more than happy to be on any committee that looked into that, to look how to apply that. I mean, there are sensitivities there. I mean, we're not for abortion across the board, but I mean, there are medical exceptions and stuff like that. But for me, for our party, I mean, we are a Christian party, and to us, it is life. And so that's our stance. That's where we would be. That's where I would be.
Jerry?
So I guess you could describe me as a bit of a policy wonk. I've been developing policy for the past 10 years to grow the cultural industries in Ontario, like film and television production, publishing, interactive digital media, and so on. So I think as far as if I was to be on a parliamentary committee, the Heritage Committee would certainly appeal to me, as would the Industry Committee, because both of those committees deal with the growth of the cultural industries in Canada in a very big way. As far as the private members bill go, I hinted at that earlier. The first private member bill I would put forward is to have ranked balloting in Canada so that we can reignite that conversation and start getting people talking about the possibility of ranked balloting as at least a first step towards electoral reform.
Thank you, Jerry. Angelique Belcourt, please.
My first engagement that I would do as an NDP MP would be to make sure that pharmacare is officially established for all people across Canada. I believe it's fundamental for us to be well, to take care of our communities, to take care of ourselves, to take care of our families and give back to our communities, do well in work. It's the fundamental right that every Canadian should have. In terms of committees, I'm an Indigenous person, so I would personally like to be involved in any community that works on improving life and working with Indigenous communities to have their voices represented in a fair and equal way in government.
Stephen.
As your PPC MP, you get a bonus. My party would not whip me. I would not end up being a potted plant following what the leader says. So that's something to please keep in mind. And giving due to the Greens, I think they have that policy as well. Elizabeth told me that. And so this is something to bear in mind. When you vote a Liberal or a Conservative, you might end up getting somebody that doesn't have a lot to say. But moving on, as far as committees, since I'm so concerned with questions of freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, I would like to be on the Justice Committee, but thinking how Max might look at me and speaking with him, probably telecommunications policy, because I know a thing or two about that.
Valerie?
Two things that I would like to see done fairly quickly. One is to support a fully funded national dementia strategy. The Liberal government, with cooperation from all the parties, has put forward in their budget a dementia strategy, but it sounds like a lot. It's $50 million over 5 years, but the true cost of dementia health in the healthcare system is more than $10 billion a year. And as our population ages, this is going to increase. So we need to address this. It affects at least 1 in 3. The other committee I'd like to be on is the Climate Emergency Healthcare Strategy, because this climate-related healthcare issues for children and seniors first, and then the rest of us, is they're starting to see the effects now.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for your question. We've got. I'm going to ask you this question because we're of course time is always in short supply, and we want to leave 10 minutes for closing remarks. So if you could answer this question fairly quickly, we'd appreciate it. So if the economy is doing so well, why are so many Canadians feel like they're not better off, or for that matter, can't seem to get ahead? Parents today are often burdened with providing shelter and assistance to their adult children. Precarious work has become the norm in our economy, with some folks having to carry 2 or even 3 jobs to make ends meet. What federal legislation, action, policy would you propose to balance employee income needs with business bottom line concerns? And we've got to go fairly quickly, and we're going to start with Jerry, please.
So this is perhaps where the more radical side of me comes out. We live in a period of the most incredible amount of wealth in the history of mankind. There's just a huge amount of wealth, and people at the bottom are struggling. I'm particularly concerned about youth that are particularly those who do not have post-secondary education and end up in service jobs that you cannot possibly buy a house or raise a family on. And if you flash back 30 or 40 years, typically those people would have a job in a factory or a distribution center or something. It actually had a decent job with a decent income, with benefits and a pension plan. And I think that there's no easy answer to this question, but the solution lies in international action, because it requires Western governments to come together and decide that they're going to tax that incredible accumulation of wealth by the way less than 1%
We're going to stop you there,
of the
Jerry.
population.
Thanks very much. We're going to move along here. Thank you. Angelique.
Canadians aren't getting ahead because they're burdened constantly with worrying about making ends meet. Families don't have the support that they need to be able to grow and be well. That's why the NDP government will instill a living wage for all Canadians in order to support themselves. We also believe that all families should have access to childcare, regardless of their job status, etc. Thank you.
So this is great. We give you 30 seconds to solve all the economic problems. Stephen, please.
Yeah, this is a highly complex question, very difficult to answer in 30 seconds. But I would say a lot of the reasons for the suffering of people at the lower end of the economic scale are due to the inevitable waves of globalism washing over our shores. Secondly, I believe a lot of it is due to the unintended effects of misguided government policies. We believe that a freer economy will create more opportunity for more people and lift all boats.
Valerie, please.
I think it's pretty complicated, and we have a 88-page platform. Part of it is dealing with poverty, income security, student debt, lack of affordable housing. There are countries in the world where their taxes are really high. Not that I'm saying we should tax us. Well, I welcome it, but I don't understand economic, because I'm a seniors critic, as well. But our platform is costed. If people with our policies had affordable housing, had a livable wage or a guaranteed livable income, had food security, then the angst would be taken away and hopefully fewer mental health issues, which also contribute to underemployment and poor employment.
Thank you,
and a
Valerie.
guaranteed livable income would get people going back to school and starting their own businesses.
Thank you, Valerie. And Chris Brown.
Okay, so quickly, this is a complicated issue. Stephen touched on international influences and stuff. It's not an easy thing to answer, but it's scary. It's a scary thing when you've got workers with no jobs. When you've got workers with no jobs and automation is coming in, what's it going to mean when that starts hitting big time? I think for the time that we have left, CHP has got policies that can lead to work projects that are going to employ people, and I think those are the things we need to pursue.
Thank you, Chris. We're rapidly running out of time, and we've allowed you enough time for your closing remarks. We started in a certain order at the beginning, and we're going to reverse that order for the closing remarks. So we will ask Jerry Hawes. You have 2 minutes, Jerry, please. Your closing remarks.
Thank you. We heard about a lot of important issues tonight, issues that touch our daily lives, Issues like affordable housing, health care, soaring student debt, and the urgency of climate change, and where the Doug Ford government is actively cutting and making lives more difficult. Where the Ford government is letting us down, we need a strong partner in the federal government who's willing to stand up to Doug Ford. There is a clear choice in this election. Either we will elect a conservative government that will take us backwards with the policies of Stephen Harper, or with cuts to vital services that we're seeing with Doug Ford, or we can choose to move forward and build upon the progress that has been made in the last 4 years. With the help of Canadians, we've helped to lift 1 million people out of poverty, and more than 300,000 of them were children, the biggest reduction in child poverty we've seen. And we've created 1.1 million jobs, most of them full-time, helping to build an economy that works for everyone. I ask you to choose Ford in this election. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech.
Thank you, Jerry. And Angelique Belcourt. Oh, no, sorry, I got that wrong. No, I got to go to Chris Brown. Sorry, I apologize. You get the last word. Chris Brown, please.
Thank you. Tonight you've heard some of my party's platforms, and as great as it would be to bring back meaningful Christian influence into politics, we are a small party, and Christianity and her tenets have increasingly fallen from favor. Nevertheless, I do believe we have something to offer. The common sense that is so often reflected in Christian doctrine, the same common sense that built this nation, is the only worthwhile standard to run a country with, and I believe this is evident in our policies. However, I want to end with two important issues that need your careful consideration. The first is purely secular and concerns the current economic cycle. We are in what has been dubbed an everything bubble. Debt liabilities are off the charts, way beyond what they were in 2008. And we are nearing the end of this fairly weak 10-year recovery. When, not if, but when this breaks, it will devastate economies worldwide, and the poor fiscal policies of the past 4 years leaves Canada particularly vulnerable. Any budgets, even your own, that do not take this into account will mean nothing when this tidal wave comes to shore, and it may only be less than 2 years out. We all need to be prepared for some pretty lean years ahead. The second issue is purely spiritual and concerns God's plan for the end times. Along with other Western nations, Canada has turned from God and has now lost his blessings. As I said before, no nation that kills its unborn, that corrupts the most basic unit of society, the family, and rejects God in the public square can have any hope of his blessings. While only a nation that promotes God in all matters can hope to prosper and thrive, the evidence of converging major end-time prophecies with world events is clearly saying that times have changed and that judgment is no longer coming. It has already begun. Get right with God through Christ and don't throw your vote away. Vote CHP. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And now, Green Party, Valerie Powell.
The largest issue today on the planet is the climate emergency, which has a direct effect on our economy, on our health, including our mental health, and our actual survival on this planet. The planet will survive, but life as we know it may not. But according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how can people think about a better future when what they need today is food security, safe, affordable housing, a job, childcare, health care, mental health care, or their next opioid fix? And this will get worse if we don't act now. If we don't all work together, all parties, create a plan and actually follow through, a plan that's longer than 4 years. Like me, the Green Party embraces both scientific fact and creative evidence, evidence-based solutions to extremely complex issues. The environment is the economy. They are intertwined. If we move to renewable energy economy, then we will create employment, we will create opportunity. And wouldn't it be a shame if we spent all the time and money cleaning up our environment only to discover that it wasn't really a crisis? I don't think we can go wrong by heading in that direction, despite what one or two scientists might say against that. The Green Party has policies guided by principles of ecological wisdom, social justice, participatory democracy, nonviolence, sustainability, and respect for diversity. These core values are what drew me to the Green Party, to work for today and to take responsibility for the next 7 generations. Please show up on Friday at City Hall for Greta Thunberg and the climate extinction, climate strike, Friday at noon.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. And now, People's Party of Canada, Stephen Mack, your closing comments.
As you have probably figured out by now, my top issue in this election is the role of government. Our government has been steadily growing in size and influence over our lives while becoming more and more out of touch with people like us. This trend must stop. The People's Party of Canada is here to turn it around. Canadians have become too used to looking to government to solve all their problems, and the regular parties are always claiming to have the solutions. We're always one more program, one more regulation, one more tax break away from utopia. Yet utopia is never delivered. The list of problems stays the same election after election. Have you ever considered that maybe the federal government might not be necessarily the best tool for dealing with every issue? The PPC trusts that each individual Canadian knows what is best for them and how to pursue their goals better than any government can. The PPC will hit the reset button on government sprawl. We will significantly reduce your taxes and leave more of your hard-earned money in your hands. A People's Party government would stick to the basics and get them right. We will leave what our Constitution says are provincial matters to the provinces. We will stop subsidizing other governments, businesses, and charities so that we can properly regulate them instead. We will leave the rest to you. A PPC government won't try to tell you how to live, nor will we tell you what to say or not say, who to love, what to believe, what to watch on TV, or what to eat. We will not try to change your behavior by punishing you, no matter how noble the aim. I'm thinking carbon taxes. We will not try to bribe you with your own money, and more importantly, not bribe you with your neighbor's money. Canadians want to be self-reliant, not reliant on government. Canadians want to help each other and can do this best locally and personally. When we are freer, we are stronger and can find a confident unity. When government gets pushed back, you can move forward.
Thank you, Stephen. And the final word today, NDP candidate Angelique Belcourt.
I believe change can happen when everyday people get together to have their needs heard and hold the government accountable to making sure that they're taking care of them. When economies do well, it's because we're taking care of the people who contribute to it. I really want to thank you all today for listening today about how the NDP can work for you. You've heard various topics from pharmacare to healthcare to housing to social support services for our communities, and I truly believe that our policies align with everyday needs of Canadians across this country. I specifically chose to run for NDP because there was no candidate in this riding, and I needed to find a party that aligned most with making sure that my responsibility to take care of the people around me was met. So on October 21st, I hope you consider voting NDP, and I encourage you to look more into our platform to see how we can work for you. Thank you.
So that just about wraps up our forum for this evening. Before we go, I just want to thank the candidates for the preparation and the thoughtfulness and your responses tonight to all these questions. Thank you very much. I'd like to hear a big round of applause for them. Special thanks to St. Paul Centre for hosting this debate. I understand that you were very kind in providing us with this great facility this evening. And also very special thanks to Aurelia for Democracy, your team. This is great. These kind of opportunities to chat with the candidates and listen to what the constituents have to say is so important, and we really appreciate your efforts. Thanks very much, audience, for being so cooperative this evening, and have a great night.